AI is here and that could replace my job, what would you say?
It is not about AI replacing your job. It is going to be more about people who use AI will replace people who do not use AI. Thought of writing the second book came in. So we called it as smacking the bank. It was actually, if you look at it, social, mobile, analytics and cloud, they were actually hitting the banks, right? It was smacking the banks.
Where do you see this whole thing, the talk around algorithmic enterprise and autonomous enterprise going?
That's when your AI models will actually give you benefits. Otherwise, data garbage in is garbage out.
Hello and welcome to the Leadership Series Show. Today our guest is Balaji. Balaji is a well-traveled business leader with thought leadership in digital transformation, data and AI. He is an inventor with 2 patents from the US PTO office. He is also an author of 2 business technology books on data privacy management and digital transformation. He is a well-known speaker in the industry and has been part of several of the forums in the industry with respect to talking on various technology topics, again on digital transformation, AI and all the latest and greatest that's going on in the industry itself. Looking forward to this conversation. Welcome to the Leadership Series Show, Balaji.
Thank you, Ramesh. Nice to meet you too.
Given your profile that you've handled, you've kind of spread across different domains and different kinds of roles that you've played. It's quite intriguing, right? On the roles that you've played. You started off like a test engineer, moved on to architecture, moved on to pre-sales, and then you're into leadership roles. You're talking about digital transformation, AI, data. You touch all the key technology trend and you're there, right? And you've been very actively involved in a lot of industry forums as well. So this is pretty fascinating and not many get an opportunity to kind of play around with all these type of roles, right? There are very few fortunate ones and looks like you are one of them. What is the thought process? Does this happen organically? Did you kind of plan through? How did this whole journey happen? Can you just talk through what happened?
Yeah, I would say that it's a mix of both, right? I was pretty lucky that I got a break during the Y2K hype, right? So basically I joined a Y2K company, and it was all about checking the dates. That got me an insight into how mainframe works, right? And then because of the demand for Y2K engineers in the US, I went to US, and there I got a view into how an enterprise IT works, how a big corporate works. I was working for an insurance company in Syracuse, and so that sort of gave me an insight into how the US IT industry also works. And then I sort of again came back. Everybody was talking about then the Java, Java wave, right? And it was the from the Y2K wave, I got transported to the e-commerce wave, right? So essentially, there I sort of took a different path there. While most of them were into Java, I got into the Microsoft stack. And that sort of gave me opportunities. Again, I was on and off from the US, but that sort of gave me some expertise into how to go into the depth of Microsoft. And I was actually into testing banking alert product. That was one of the first banking product from an alerting perspective. And here what I did was it was very difficult working with the engineers of that product. So they always used to actually give some code which was probably working, but they were not having enough time. So what that resulted was in me having to do the complete installation, and I was doing it repeatedly. Then I figured out that maybe I should not be doing this repeatedly. I started writing code, and I almost I wrote a end-to-end testing and deployment tool, and that sort of got me into the development world. So actually making that shift from maintenance to testing to development, that's generally supposed to be tough, but I think that was circumstances which enabled me to sort of write that code, and that got me into the architecture world. So again, I would say that I was not a really seasoned architect. I could do technology, if something is wrong, I could go fix it, I could identify what were the issues. And then I joined one of the leading IT services company, and I think they had a good grooming culture. So they got me into an architect certification. So that sort of gave me a view into, how to look at strategic thinking and how do you plan for the future. And essentially it is all about, there's nothing right or wrong. It is about, what is the context behind taking a decision and whether your decision is actually fit for that particular context. That's what it is. And then it is all about, once you take a decision, how do you, justify based on the data that, that is the right path to go, and then articulating that to the customers. So I think that is how the architectural training got me into something which is more about, looking at technology which will be constantly changing, and then also looking at different areas, right, and then finding out patterns. So that whole discovery of patterns, how do you reproduce one pattern to a different scenario, how do you identify when a pattern needs to be applied, right, and what are anti-patterns. I think all those sort of, got integrated into me. I think that was the skill, probably what the architectural mindset gave to me. And then because architectural mindset also ensures that you have to convince, you have to actually do your research if you want to convince somebody, and nobody is right or wrong, right, it is all about the context. So that also got me into articulation, and that's where I got into pre-sales. And I also got a view into research, how do you do research, and again it was about a particular problem where, if you want to outsource your data, how do you protect privacy of sensitive data, right. Again it was, again I used to converse with a lot of CIOs, they used to have the same problem. So again, taking the same problem, a pattern to solve that problem, how do you productize it. So that's how I got into the research world and the IP world, and that also got me into IP commercialization. And then because maybe during that time, like I was also into the labs world, I also got into mobility, social analytics, cloud, all these quite early in the stage. So generally when you get yourself early into a technology, probably that will keep you there for about 2 years, right, 2 years ahead before others catch up. So I think those sort of factors sort of help me, transition between multiple roles, multiple technologies, multiple geographies. And because I was also part of the consulting team, I got an opportunity to not only go to US but also UK, parts of a lot of countries in the Europe, and I went to Japan, and I went to New Zealand, Canada. So all this also taught me that we should not fear different culture, right, that cross cultural sensitivity, that's a big part. So I think those are some of the things which sort of helped me transition between multiple roles. And whenever I went for an engagement, it was not like I just go there for 2 days, 3 days and come back. I was fortunate enough to get engagements where it was about 2 to 3 months, which allowed me to explore that particular country, look at how that particular culture is. So it sort of helped me get that perspective also. So I think that overall development, I was lucky to get that overall exposure, I would say, to different technologies, different nationalities and different domains.
That's awesome. I think you spoke about a whole lot of topics, right? And I think there's great takeaways from it. I see that one of the things that you spoke about is the waves, right? I think you spoke about, really moving from one wave to another wave, right? Starting off with Y2K to, at that point in time Y2K was big, so you were part of that wave, and then you moved on to the Java wave or the e-com wave, and then so on and so forth. Now I think one of the things is that opportunity comes as part of these waves, and other ways as well, and your readiness towards it, right? Your readiness to kind of take up the challenge, adapt to it, and then deliver becomes very crucial. So looks like you've done that very well, right? You also spoke about really into cross-cultural sensitivity, awareness about cross-cultural sensitivity. That is far more less spoken, right? Because I think you get a lot more insights, a different perspective of how globally people are thinking about technology, people sensitivity, where people are the crucial part, and we kind of tend to over focus on technology at times, looking away from where it's actually going to be applied and who's the consumers of it, right? So I think great points, and I'm glad that I'm having this conversation with you, because I think it seems one, embracing, taking up the challenge and moving with it becomes one of the crucial things. Learning, continuous learning as part of the journey, and I think you moved from one role to another role to another role, but being open to it is another big thing. And cultural sensitivity, I think a lot of them look at these opportunities that comes on their way in terms of going out of the country and exploring, to be more either one part is obviously the economics of it, and the other is more towards hey, this is cool for me, I get an international exposure. But how many people really invest in terms of understanding the culture and get that sensitivity and add into the product? And I think when you do product development, these sensitivities will make your product development or the process itself truly global. So I think fascinating. I think it seems like like you said, I think you've been truly blessed, and I think it's a wonderful thing. Now I also see that you are far more involved in the technology space, right? Not just as a vice president, you're just not sitting there and giving instructions to people, but you're kind of spearheading in terms of technology itself. I see that you've written a couple of books on data privacy management and digital transformation. Can you talk a little bit about those two books? I think that's both are relevant. I mean, we say data is oil, and I think you're talking about data privacy, which is kind of a very touchy subject as well. And then the whole era of digital transformation. We are so big on digital transformation. Both are very relevant, and the latest kind of things that are happening. Can you touch a little bit about your book and how did that happen? And
yeah, so it was actually an interesting discussion what I was having with multiple people. I saw that like I mentioned, I was in conversation with quite a lot of CIOs on their problems about outsourcing to a different vendor, or allowing people to test their systems because of the privacy and the impact it had on their IT budgets, and also on the impact it had on how they service the businesses. So that sort of set me thinking that how do we solve this problem to a lot of people, right? And I saw that most of the people were in very, very early stages of maturity, right? So how do you take a more wider view? How do you see, for example, data privacy is basically an integration of three areas, I would say. One is data itself, data and domain, right? Domain and data, they are closely interlinked. Second is about technology, right? Third is about legal. I mean, in not many areas now, legal is actually getting into a lot of areas, but if you look at earlier, technology and legal, they were actually on other sides of the enterprises, right? They never used to talk to each other, but this was basically one area where they needed collaboration. So what I realized is, like earlier, data was free, right? So everybody got data, but they did not know how to protect that data, and until a kind of breach happened. So not only that, everybody, once they gave data, they never knew what was happening with that data. right, whether you're using it for the right purpose or whether it was actually for the ulterior purpose, right? You never knew that. So, and most people, in fact, there is a saying, right, like two types of organizations in this world. One who knows that they've been breached and they're keeping silent about it. Yeah. The others are one who know that they've been breached and they've announced it, right? So it's only these two kind of areas, right? So almost every organization has one or the other data breach incident, right? It's just that whether they know about it or they don't know about it, and that's when we saw a lot of regulations come in, and especially in the banking and the insurance world, they were a lot more regulated and there were a lot of fines, right? So that is when we looked at, it cannot be just a technical approach. So you need to actually have, on one side you need to see what regulations impact your business, and then from the business you need to know which data you can share with others, which data you can actually share within your enterprise, which data you can publicly share, which data you need to protect. And once you know which data to protect, where all does that particular data lie in your enterprise? It could be in some files, it could be in some database, you don't know. And then after that, it's about, how do you protect that privacy of the data and what technique should you use? So I think all this were actually sort of puzzles to most people, and I thought that I should sort of bring it all together. So that's how that particular book happened.
So when you refer to the legal aspect, right, was it more from a regulatory standpoint, or was it?
Yeah, it was.
There's more than regulatory.
It is regulatory because if you look at, I think the post 2000s, I would say around 2010 to 2015, that's when you had a lot of these regulations coming in, GDPR, right? And earlier also there were regulations, but then there were no concept of fines, right? But once there was this concept of fines which was tied to your revenue, right? So I think that's when most enterprises started taking this seriously, right? And so that's how this whole regulations impact, what an enterprise should do with respect to data management.
And on the digital transformation side, the book that you've written, what area of digital transformation does it focuses on?
Yeah, so again, that was basically the thought there was, I saw that there was a race between enterprisation of the consumer and the consumerization of the enterprise. So if you look at from 2007 onwards, 2007 was a very momentous year, right? You had the birth of, or rather the relaunch of Apple, but the iPhone just started, right? But then you had Facebook coming in, so that was the birth of social media, or at least the popularization of the social media world, right? And then you had cloud also come in, right? So and so all these were actually interacting with each other. So social media, mobile, analytics, cloud, right? And so almost like it was like just an explosion of multiple technologies, right? So what I saw is like most people were actually confused on when to use what, right? That is one. Second is, if you look at the drivers, because of this race between the enterprisation of the consumer and the consumerization of the enterprise, until then it was like a one-way street, right? For example, banks could just do what they want, and the consumers have to, sort of bear with it, right? It was true for any enterprise, in fact, any industry, right? They could just do what they wanted, and they were more powerful because they had data, but and their technology was something which was not democratized at that time. But once you had, for the people, access to mobile, so people had everything on their fingertips, right? And if you look at the experience which all the mobile apps started giving as a consumer, right, like Facebook or whatever it is, right, that is something what the same person who was using Facebook or any other mobile apps, they were not getting in their enterprise, right? In enterprise, it was an old system where they had to take reports, right, and they had to wait for so much of time, right? So that is when the enterprises, they started demanding, the enterprises, if you want me to serve my consumer with the best experience, then you also need to provide me the best experience as employee experience. So I would say that that whole intersection of what the experience is, where the experience begins, how do you continue that experience, how do you sort of give the same experience, same consistent experience to the end user, right? All those were some things which again I thought that most enterprises were not ready for. So I also had a conversation with a very senior leader in the banking space in one of the leading IT services company, right? I mean, so we sort of agreed that this was a problem, and we sort of felt that we need to put our thoughts into this whole intersection of social, mobile, analytics and cloud, and how they are actually transforming the enterprises, especially the banking and the financial world, right? I think so that's how this thought of writing the second book came in. So we called it as Smacking the Bank. It was actually, if you look at it, social, mobile, analytics and cloud, they were actually hitting the banks, right? It was smacking the banks. So we didn't put K in that book, we just put it as SMAC ING the book. So essentially it is about how have these technologies converged, what do you need to do from a social, mobile perspective, analytics perspective, cloud perspective, and apart from that, how do you improve customer experience using these technologies, what are the frameworks for that, how do you improve employee experience, how do you improve your operations. And finally the way we sort of concluded is, if you look at it, prior to 2010, right, only the enterprise could be virtual, right, but people had to go to a bank, they had to go to a branch to get their things done, right? But post 2010, you started having this whole mobile interface. So the enterprises, you don't need to go to the branch, right? So you had a virtual interface to the branch, and even then you also started getting virtual currency. So your enterprise can be virtual, your consumer can be virtual, and they can meet and collaborate virtually, and then even the transactions can be virtual, right? So it is all about how much more virtual you get, not only in terms of transaction but in terms of the parties itself, right? So that is basically how we concluded actually.
Yeah, and it made sense, right? I think I think you've been sticking with the waves, and I think with both the waves that you spoke about, and then with this book coming around at the right time, touching on data, touching on digital transformation becomes very crucial. I think the other wave that we are seeing these days is the AI causing disruption, right? And with AI causing the kind of disruption that we are seeing and anticipating, and I think there's a rapid change that you see in a very short span of time. Where is the industry moving towards, right? What do you see as the trends, and what are the kinds of things that you are observing?
Yeah, so most people have this view that AI is very new, right? It is an established technology. It has been there from 1950s, right? Earlier it used to be called as expert systems, right? And then it has sort of evolved. Then you had this AI winter. There were algorithms, but the technology was not sufficiently economical to run these algorithms. So what ended up happening, only the big enterprises used to have AI, and using AI they used to either serve their customers or grow their businesses. With the introduction of cloud, right, your storage has become very cheap, right? And you don't need to have a high-end computer to run your algorithms, right? You can actually get NVIDIA GPUs on rent, right? So essentially that whole shift from a kind of capex to an OPEX world and pay-per-use world began, right? So I think that is probably what I would say is one of the key reasons why suddenly AI has become big, right? So that is one thing. Now the next thing is, whenever something is closed, proprietary, not many people get access to, and it doesn't look very popular, right? But once something is open sourced, there is disruption in the world. So that's what is happening in today's world from an AI perspective, right? You had chat GPT, right? And then you have now so many open source LLMs come into picture. So the whole open source mechanism, that is what is driving AI adoption. Like when you look at chat GPT, if you can just type and you can get answers, see, it may not be fully correct, that's a major problem, right? Hallucination. But the ease of getting answers which probably took some humans to reason quite a lot, and consolidating 4-5 things, getting some 1000-page document summarized as part of a kind of just one request to the machine, right? So I think that is how AI got democratized, and nowadays it is not just the technology guys talking about AI, right? It is coming from the boards. The boards and the senior executives, they are asking, boss, what are you doing on AI, right? So I think it has actually gone, it is coming from the top today. So that is why from an enterprise perspective, there will be a lot of AI adoption. So the way this happens again is like people think that AI is something which you can just quickly get done, right, because of the tools available. Yep. But again, here data is the key. If you have the right data, if you have clean data, if you have trusted data, that's when your AI models will actually give you benefits. Otherwise, data garbage in is garbage out, right? So I think that is one of the key things. So people who have had good data engineering practices, good data management practices, I think these enterprises, they'll be able to catch the wave of AI. But if that's not there, then your AI strategy or AI apps, they're going to be worthless. So now coming to the impact of AI on how the industries are going to change, how the industries are going to be impacted by AI, it is more about this human machine interaction, right? So basically, if you look at in Turing test, I mean, there's a concept called Turing test, right? So basically, a system is called artificially intelligent if a human does not know whether they are interacting with a human or a system, right? So basically, when you interact with a system, you don't know whether it's a human giving a response or it is basically a machine giving a response. That means that system has artificial intelligence. So that basically is what is the interaction between man and machine. So I think you will see more and more automation, you will see more and more repeatable tasks getting automated, and you will also see a lot more of augmentation. So it is not just, see, there will be cases where people will say that your jobs are going to be out, or AI will replace your jobs. It is not about AI replacing your jobs. It is going to be more about people who use AI will replace people who do not use AI. So that's the key shift which is going to happen. The other thing is more about how you will have more and more augmentation. So how you can get done more and more work in shorter time. So I think these are areas where AI is going to impact.
So I think you kind of mentioned that AI started off pretty early and now it's kind of getting democratized, which is right. I think one of the things is AI existed for a long time, but I guess the difference what I see is, if you look at the earlier part, right, we were more on the, it's like the right brain left brain kind of stuff, right? I think we were more on the analytical side of things, and we are kind of moving now into the creative side of things. With generative AI coming in, I think a lot more creative context based applications becomes thing. And I think you had also mentioned about the context being one of the key, right? You can have data, you can have all these stuff, but if the context is not there, your application kind of the impact of your application would not be there as much as it needs to be. And I think that's where the creative side of thing comes, and with a lot of these AIs catching up on the creative side of things, and each of these models becoming a lot more better and the use cases getting a lot more familiarized, I guess you know, we are kind of moving into that direction, right? Where, so having said that, where do you see, and you kind of gently touched on this topic around humans and the AI, the relationship between. So there's a lot of this fear with many, right, in terms of you know, AI replacing humans. People who are on that boat of saying, hey, AI is here and that could replace my job, what would you say? I mean, what would one sitting on that boat thinking on those lines should be doing?
See, I think if you go back to 1980s, right, people had fear of computerization. But if you look at it, in fact, in India, most of the political parties, they were, you know, not in favor of computerization because they felt that that's going to actually lead to reduction of jobs, right? But we have sort of ridden, you know, that wave, right? And things have become better for the consumers, right? So if people don't have that learning culture, I think there is, if you just want to do what you have already done in the same way what you have done earlier, right? I think those people may be in the risk of, you know, getting replaced by something which you know, an AI can do, right? But if you're constantly evolving, adapting, if you're looking at this as an opportunity, I think definitely there are opportunities which AI is going to provide. It's AI generally is going to make life easier for people, right? And if you look at you know, today you have this GitHub Copilot, for example, right? So here you can actually have developers, you know, writing faster code, because through the GitHub Copilot you will be able to know, okay, which what should be your code, right? And so basically it's all about speed. So how do you get things done much faster, right? But of course, like, there are downsides, right? How much can you actually believe what an AI gives as an output, right? So this is where your skill comes in. So you cannot just go by what AI gives as a recommendation. So essentially, for that whole question, humans need to be there. There is this whole concept of humans in the loop, right? So if not, then what you will get is you know, something which is not going to be useful. It is going to be contrary. You will hear of stories where people believed you know, in some maps, right, and they wanted to go to the next city, but they ended up in a faraway desert, right? So it is just about that. So you should, you should, correct. You should know where you are going, and you should know how you need to use these tools. So otherwise, even if you have AI, you know, like people say, right, a fool with a tool is still a fool, right? So I think AI can have an impact, but it is more about the repeatable tasks. So if you can innovate yourself using these tools, you stand a good chance of, you know, still being in job, and in fact capitalizing from what AI can provide.
And I think with this whole AI itself maturing, right, I think, you know, there's a part of it which was more analytics focused. There were enhancements in terms of recommendations and stuff like that. With AI able to process a lot more data, right, in terms of data mining, like you said, I think there's a lot of input. The way I look at it is AI is nothing but it's just mass production, right? You produce the data right, you give the right ingredients to it, it's going to produce that. Where do you see this whole thing, the talk around algorithmic enterprise and autonomous enterprise going, right? And I think, where are we with that, and in adoption as well as the progress scale itself, right, onto each of this? Where do you see where we are, right?
Yeah. So essentially, I would say that many enterprises today are already algorithmic, right? So if you use algorithms for decision making, you already tick that first box of algorithmic enterprise, right? But of course, like, how do you capitalize on being an algorithmic enterprise? There are some guidelines, best practices for it, One is of course like what we call as AI literacy and data literacy, right? The employees should know when to use what tools, right? So that is the first thing, and they should know how do they make sense of data, right? So that is the second thing, right? They should know their data, right? So that is the first part, so which is called as literacy, right? So that's the first key part. Second part is you need to have a sufficient mechanism to look at the risks. So if you look at the last year, you have so many regulations coming in from each country, right? What they look at is how are you governing risks, right? And many of the regulations today are talking about looking at the impact of AI, right? Whatever is high risk, right? So they need to go through a regulatory process, whereas if it is medium risk or low risk, right? So they can be deployed and they can be used, right? So I think you need to look at, you need to have a formal process, you need to have a formal organization of looking at the risks. How do you want to deploy data? How do you want to deploy AI agents? How do you want to embed AI into your processes, right? And then the third part is about this whole concept of responsible AI, right? So how do you ensure that the data you use to feed these models, they are all free of bias, right? And how do you ensure that they are being used responsibly? How do you know that some elements can't, unscrupulous elements, they can't actually use it in an unintended manner, right? That's the third part. Fourth part is, if you look at typically from a testing perspective, things will have to move from a deterministic approach to a probabilistic approach. So that means that you give, for a traditional application, if you give an input, you will always expect the same output, and that's when, if you test it, right, whatever you give as input for a particular set of input, you will always get an output. But that's not the way your chat GPT or LLMs will behave, right? So you can get different responses for similar questions, right? So how do you have that mindset shift from a deterministic mindset to a probabilistic mindset, right? I think that's the other component of an algorithmic enterprise. Now coming to autonomous, so essentially, to put it in one sentence, it is about using algorithms for decision making, right? So that's the first part from an algorithmic enterprise perspective. Coming to autonomous enterprise, that's like an autonomous car, right? So basically your autonomous car will know where there is a hump, right? And it will know, and if there is something in front, whether it should actually take a right and then move forward, or it should brake. Stop. Right? So that is what is an autonomous enterprise. So I don't think most organizations are yet in autonomous enterprise. You have Polish rum company called Dictator, which is supposed to have a humanoid robo called Mika as the CEO, right? So basically what is being claimed is that a lot of decisions which needs to be taken by a CEO, right? This particular humanoid can actually do it much faster and in a much more accurate manner, right? So basically in an autonomous enterprise, it is all interlinked with data. There are automatic agents which will know how to react, how to respond to different events, right? That's where it is, right? But all said and done, we have to see how this particular experiment sort of actually works from an autonomous enterprise, right? And there's also a human angle to it, right? So definition of an autonomous enterprise is you use algorithms to to sort of heal yourself, self-healing. All that can be done using AI. So you actually sort of automate the way you do self-healing also, right? And now what is going to be the impact on humans? I think that's a thought still. We don't know if there are no employees. Right? So who makes money in the end?
Yeah, I think one of the things I see here is that not everything can be done, because I think it is just based on the data that you're providing, right? It's kind of mass producing kind of thing, right? And simplifying.
Yeah, and also if you look at, there is increasingly this whole VUCA, right, volatility and all this coming in. How much can AI handle? I mean, can a AI handle VUCA scenarios better, or can a human do that better, right? I think that's a big question actually.
And given this whole context of what you were talking about, right, I see that currently organizations are more hybrid, right? There is a certain level of autonomy, there is a certain level of
Yeah, the mature ones have some autonomous,
autonomous
capability. Yes,
capabilities, right? But there's also this whole challenge around transparency and explainability of it, right? Because many of these tools that we have today can't even state where they are getting the data from, what's the model that they are using, and once you don't know how those decisions are being made, it's going to be very, very tricky. And especially when you look at regulatory industries which are more regulated, I think it's going to be a challenge out there, right? So I think still, one of the things that I've seen is that I feel that the organizations are still tiptoeing between these technologies in terms of AI adoption and seeing what use cases works and not. Do you see a similar thing from your perspective with your interactions with customers?
Yeah, I think many of them are still trying to figure out where they should use AI, right? I think there are very few companies who have an AI risk mechanism, right? So for me, if I look at it, that whole risk framework what you have for AI, that is going to be the biggest obstacle for enterprises adopting AI. If you look at a lot of news articles in today's world, a lot of articles on AI, right? They are saying that this year, because of the ease with which you can create AI models, you will have a lot of desperate situations, because you would have many companies deploying AI models in their consumer facing applications without thought to how it should be governed, without testing it enough, right? That whole concept of probabilistic testing will not be sufficient enough to ensure that these are all deployed. And in fact, they are saying that this will also lead to AI winter. You will see a lot of such instances, and after that there will be a lot of fines on the enterprises, which will actually again lead to people's sort of putting a stop or suspending some of these experiments, right? So I think it all depends on how carefully companies as well as startups are going to treat in this particular AI world for them to succeed. We will see a lot of people falling off the cliff because that whole risk assessment has not been done.
And so how long do you think how long far away we are in terms of really adopting and, let's say, increasing our adoption level, right? May not be fully, but let's say to a reasonable levels. What would be the adoption timeline?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, ChatGPT, I think the time they took to hit that, in fact, 100 million users, right? Adoption has been the fastest, right? So if you look at it, people have adopted AI knowingly or unknowingly, right? And if you look at most of your apps, they already have some elements of AI in that, right? So I think there is already AI adoption. That's what I would say. Now, it is being used more from a narrow AI perspective. It is being used for doing a specific task, right? But now, how do you orchestrate multiple smaller use cases, right, and sort of get into a larger application? I think that's where we'll see a lot more challenge, and that's where only the mature ones will be able to adopt and deploy these things. And generally, especially in the AI world and the digital world, right? It's a winner takes it all, right? So you will finally have some 3-4 big guys, capitalizing on this, while the rest will, not be there at all. That's how I see things happening.
Balaji, thank you. I think this has been an interesting discussion. We need to wrap it up here. Thank you for sharing your views on AI, how it is shaping the world from an industry standpoint, and also in terms of what to expect, right, and how the change is going to look like. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.